All right, I'm going to demonstrate how to organize data in Google Sheets using Mindstudio. So I have a Google Sheet open here titled Sales Leads, which has some dummy sales data. So it has the lead ID, the name, and the address. And what we want to do is sanitize that data so that the first name, last name, and the respective properties of the address are separated. So what we're going to do is come into Mindstudio and add a block here to first fetch the data from Google Sheets. So we can add a fetch Google Sheets block, and Mindstudio makes it really nice and easy to specify which sheet you're interested in. So we can click on the account. I've already synced my account, that's why that is here. And then let's choose this sheet. So we'll choose the sales lead sheet, and then we'll come in here and we want to specify which sheet. So I like to click into this twice, copy, and then paste. That way I'm not making any typos. And then I'll just say we want the entire sheet. So bang, A to Z. And then once it grabs this data, we need to specify what to save the output variable as. So it's going to grab the data and then it's going to save it as something. You can kind of visualize it as, maybe make a note here. Oops. If you press N on the keyboard, you can bring up the note section. So once the data is fetched from this block, it's going to save it as something. And then we'll just write here, this is our data. And so we need to specify what we want to call this data so that the remaining places in the workflow know where to look. And so in this case, oops, this should be, well, let's go back, raw leads, that's right. Okay, fetch data, and we'll just call this the same thing for consistency. All right, so it's good practice to just test each step. So you can either come up here and click Run in Debugger. You can actually test individual blocks, but I like to just use Command R, which will run the entire workflow. So Run in Debugger, Run Agent, and then we'll click Run. And then if you maximize this, notice it'll open up this window up here, or it'll add a tab here for the full screen view. And then you can see in here what the result of the workflow sequence was. So in this case, it looks like it is grabbing the data, which is great. So we can move on to step 2, which is to actually specify what we want to do with this data. So as we mentioned, we stored this data as raw leads. Mindstudio makes it really easy to access the names of variables that you've saved in previous steps. So what we want to do is we want to say ingest the raw leads data. And one thing to note here is that it's good practice to add tags around your variable calls. So we can talk about this in another video, but basically you want to make sure that the large language model knows that this is a variable as opposed to just some text with some funny styling around it. So we want to say ingest this variable information, which has the name raw leads, and separate it into the format below. Okay. So what is the format? Well, the format is what we would like this data to look like. So we want to provide an example which follows this format. So we'll go ahead and we'll write out a dummy example of how the data should render. So we'll say something like 9, 3, 1, 4, 5, 6, and we'll say John, and we'll say Doe, and make sure that we're not adding any spaces, right? Because we're going to output this in a CSV, which we'll talk about in a second. And then we'll say Boston as the city. We'll say MA, Massachusetts as the state. Okay. We'll say just whatever zip code. I guess we'll use actually. It should be okay to use whatever zip code because it's the right number of digits. So we'll say 1 or 4, 1, 3, 2, 6 in the United States. Oops, actually what we want is the zip after the country. And one thing we forgot to add is the name of the street. So that's going to come before the city, right? So you're going to say 1, 2, 3 Oak Street in Boston. Okay. And that should be all you need for the model to say, okay, let's make it like this. Okay. What is nice about Mindstudio is that it also helps you specify this later in this block. So we want to copy this, right? Then we want to come down, and we don't want to display this to the user. We want to save this as a variable. So display to user is going to display to the person that's actually working with this agent in Mindstudio. We want to actually save it as a variable again so that we can add one more block, which is going to actually upload the data into Google Sheets. So we're going to save this as a variable. We're going to name this sanitized data, and let's get in the habit of making sure we use the right practice. So sanitized data, and then what we're going to do is save this as CSV, as a CSV schema. And the reason for that is so that when we upload this into Google Sheets, it's very easy to transfer the data correctly as opposed to having a long string of text. So that's what we want to do, and that's where this comes into play. This is a comma separated list of values without any spaces in between them, and so that's really important because this is what the system is going to look for in terms of the output. So you can give an example of the output so that the model knows the format that you like. And then again, let's run this in the debugger to make sure that everything's pulling in correctly. So the command for that, if you look here, is Command R if you're on a Mac, and we'll run this. Okay, and I like to make it full screen, and now you can see it already fetched the data. Now it's running the next step, which is the generate text step, where it's actually working to format in the way that we specified. And here's the result. So you have the ID, first name, last name, the street, the city, state, country, and the zip code. So it looks like it's working correctly, which is great. All right, so now if we exit out of the debugger, we can probably delete this note. And let's go to our last step, which is to actually add this to Google Sheets. So what we'll do is we'll add an update Google Sheet block. We'll select the account, select the sheet, and then we need to specify the actual worksheet within this workbook. So we will copy the sanitized leads worksheet. And what we want to do is, there are a couple different options here. So overwrite data would be, if you had a long list of data, it would overwrite it every time. Depending on what you're trying to do, that might be useful. In our case, we don't want that. We want add to bottom. Update by range is specifying a specific range within the sheet that you want to update. But in our case, we just want to have this be one long list that keeps adding sales leads. So we're going to select add to bottom. And we're just going to place the range into, we're just going to add the name of the worksheet here as the range. We don't want to like specify a specific range. We just want to say, look for this worksheet and then add it to the bottom. All right, and so the content of this is going to be the sanitized leads variable. So that's what's coming out of here, sanitized leads, and then we are going to be uploading that into the Google Sheet. So to recap, we start the workflow. We fetch the data from the Google Sheet. We store it in a variable. We then take that data. We make our adjustments, which we've specified here. Luckily, we don't have to write a prompt that's too long. Once we've done that, we store that as a sanitized leads variable, and then we take that data that's transformed and we upload it into Google Sheets. So if we've done this correctly, we should see when we run this workflow that this data gets converted into the data, into the sanitized data with the correct formatting here. I'm going to again run this in the debugger. So Command R. I'm going to maximize it just so I can see what's happening. And it completed. And we can see that the data is sanitized. It's good practice to check at least a few records. So 9117 1938, 9117 1938, Ethan Cooper, 9757 Oak Avenue in Brookfield, Arizona. Okay, it does look like this was successful. Let's check one more. And we can discuss how you would set up an AI agent to automatically detect if there were any discrepancies in the output, but that would be for another video. So if we check the second lead, Priya 35172177, it does look like her data was transferred over correctly as well. So that's one way that you can adjust data with Mindstudio. Thanks for watching.